Okay, so we have hit probably the most anticipated episode of Watchmen so far, episode 8. A God walks into a bar. Now, obviously, the play on words in the title here, a God walks into a bar, Angela Abar. So you saw that coming a mile away, and that the God being Dr. Manhattan. So we see this episode open up with the back of Dr. Manhattan, and we're in Vietnam. It's 2009. It's the day they celebrate Dr. Manhattan every year. And the song playing in the background is Rhapsody in Blue. This is a little theme they got going on during the episode, just having different classical pieces that have the name Blue in it, which is just great. So much attention to detail in this show. So you see Dr. Manhattan actually grabs a mask of himself, just fitting in with the theme of this whole season about people wearing masks. In this case, even Dr. Manhattan himself is putting on a mask to hide behind. And a really funny thing you gotta catch, they pan up to the graffiti of Dr. Manhattan we saw in the previous flashback episode of Vietnam. The murderer part of it is crossed out, and they added a huge dong on to Dr. Manhattan, which is pretty funny. I love the show always acknowledges that part of the fan base's obsession of that. So Dr. Manhattan goes right up to Angela here at the bar, asks to sit down with her, and he's like, I'm gonna guess why you're alone. You're commemorating the anniversary of your parents' death. She's like, how do you know about that? And he's like, in 20 minutes, you're about to tell me all about your parents. So if you hadn't read the comics, this is where, as the audience member, it's time to get ready for a Dr. Manhattan nonlinear storytelling effect here. And to pull this off is an incredible task. So you're watching and seeing, will they do it? But a really good part here is Angela saying, is this a Zeus story? You're a god coming down from Olympus trying to get laid, and he turned himself into a swan or something to blend in. What I love about that is it's exactly what Dr. Manhattan's kind of about. Always about getting laid and falling in love. And that in this story, he will try to blend in as Cal. And while this is happening in the bar, in the background, there's a waltz that's played called the Blue Danube, fitting with the blue theme of music. So we get a lot of answers in this episode as well. In particular, one here where Dr. Manhattan explains that Dr. Manhattan we saw on the television footage in episode 1, where he's on Mars, that is just a decoy. For the past 20 years, he's been decoying that, and he's actually been on Europa, a moon of Jupiter. And this sort of starts to get nutty, where he's like, I'm simultaneously on Europa and in this bar. And he says it's 1985. So the way they're narrating it and him showing Create Europa just looked amazing. And it felt so much like Dr. Manhattan's passages in the comic when it's Passages of Time. So they pulled that off great here in the show, which was really blew me away the most about this episode. And just his tone and how he is and how he's just so blunt. And him just saying that he made life in 90 seconds because she made a joke about, did he take Sunday off? So it's really interesting in how much they compare him just to the God we know in Christianity in this episode, just talking about Adam and Eve and how he says they're fictional. And we go to his past when he was a child in England, but what's crazy is now he's explaining he's a child in England, he's in this bar, and he's on Europa all at the same time. And that the manner he created is directly from his childhood on Europa, and it makes him feel safe. And just again, attention to details. In 1936 in England, when he's a kid here, you see he grabs an apple to eat, just going to this Adam and Eve theme about them grabbing temptation of the apple. And we see here that we get a glimpse at his father, who was the watchmaker from the comics. And then we get to look at this little jar with the life in it, and it's just cool how he's narrating over this, saying that part in his childhood was an inspiration for a sealed atmosphere that would become Europa. So he sees the original Crookshanks and Phillips banging here, and this is the first time he says he knows love, first time he's seeing sex, and they explain to him that sex is a beautiful thing and it creates life. So this was important too, because it kind of just, again, reiterates where John Osterman real upbringing came of just being a man of love here and of wanting to create life that been ingrained with him even before the incident becoming Dr. Manhattan. And they give him a Bible here, and they tell him about Genesis and how that part of the Bible is about how God created the world. And they're like, make it your purpose to create something beautiful. So it's just really cool how they wrapped it around to him having the idea of Europa from that moment. That was so just impactful on him. And how it cuts to 7 decades later where we actually got the reveal of who Mr. Phillips and Crookshanks were. And then back in the bar, Angela says, you have quite the imagination. And Dr. Manhattan says back, 6 months from now, a friend will tell me I have a lack of imagination. And this is where this episode just started to blow me away, because it all ties back around to just certain lines with this nonlinear storytelling, which we'll get to when he's actually with Ozymandias later on. And then Angela's like, well, why did you leave Europa if it's so great? And he's like, I love you. I was already in love with you. And he doesn't experience the concept of before. So what's smart about this writing, it's also explaining at the same time for people who didn't read the comics what Dr. Manhattan's deal is and how he is as a character and his set of skills per se. And it does it in a way that doesn't make it boring for people who already know this stuff. It like sneaks it in there where a lot of the audience might feel totally in Angela's shoes, which work. But he takes off his mask here and explains he's natural blue, but she's like, don't you glow? And he doesn't want to glow. He says he can, but it would give away who he is. And it's interesting because we never actually see in this episode that face she saw of Dr. Manhattan, the true face, because when he is revealed later on, she says, hey, your face stayed the same. So that's interesting too, they never showed that. But look, Angela's like, she hates Dr. Manhattan. This is the man that led to the events that got her parents killed. And he explains he went to Vietnam because he was just trying to be what people want him to be. Again, explaining stuff for people who didn't read the comics. And then he's like, I regret it if that helps. Haven't you still done stuff before that you knew you were going to regret? And this is great because it also shows the human side of Dr. Manhattan, which brings him more grounded in reality, and why Watchmen as a whole is just such a great written comic and a great written character in Dr. Manhattan. He's just a Superman with a human emotions here. And she's like, well, this is a problem. If we're going to date, like, we're going to have to go out in public. And he's like, you know what? You're the one who tells me about a great solution for this, which is you're telling me right now, which is actually 2 weeks for you, Angela. And she's like, well, what is the idea? And he's like, I'm not telling you that because it wouldn't be your idea then, which is just when your head starts to spin, but it makes complete sense. It wouldn't be true to her if he was to ruin that. So we go to the 2 weeks from the bar when Angela is in the morgue. They're trying to find a skin for John, and Angela brings out Cal eventually. And we learn he was a man who dropped dead, probably a heart attack, and he has no one there to pay for his autopsy, no family. And this is when we get the first glow of Dr. Manhattan happening onto Angela, which is really cool. And then he becomes Cal. But he's still Dr. Manhattan completely in Cal's body, and he still has the symbol on his forehead. And she's like, you forgot your thing. And he's like, I'm gonna forget so much more. Again, because he could see in the future. So when it gets really cool is when he's actually talking to her in the bar, and he tells her they'll be together for 10 years, but it will end tragically, setting up the theme for this episode. And then he has to prove to her how he knows the future, and he says, your favorite song's about to play, which is Tunnel of Love. But she doesn't even know it yet that's her favorite song, because she doesn't even recognize the song. But at that moment, he knows that's when she'll make it her favorite. And just in talking about his power to see the future, he's like, you don't believe me now, but it'll be the reason you tell me to leave in 6 months. So you cut to them in that moment 6 months later, them having sex. And in classic Dr. Manhattan form, he's ruining the sex with his mouth and telling her about the night at the bar they met. He's there, and he's just predicting this impending argument they're gonna have. And he's just saying to her, until this moment, my power of seeing the future made you feel safe, but now that's not the case anymore. And this is when he becomes super blunt and almost emotionless, and he's just calling her out and why she has this psychology saying she has a fear of never having a family because her was taken away. And she's like, well, when was the last time you were afraid? And he says 1959, he's explaining when he turned into Dr. Manhattan. But he's actually experiencing that in that moment, because it's, for him, he's really in every single time. And he says, I'm experiencing it right now. So is he always afraid in a way? And she's like, denying that this is going to lead to this big argument, and him and her telling him to leave. But she's like, do you need me to say it? And he's like, yes. And she goes, leave. And then he zaps away. And it's really cool. You see him appear now at Veight's headquarters in Antarctica in true Dr. Manhattan form, but now in the version of Cal, fully naked. And there's a great line here where Dr. Manhattan's like, how did you know it was me? And Veight's like, because only Dr. Manhattan would have the balls to show up in a full birthday suit. That was great. They really nailed this relationship between the two of them together. It's the first time we're seeing it in the show, and it couldn't have been more accurate and truthful to the characters we know and love. And then Veight's like, how long has it been since the last time we talked? And Dr. Manhattan gives him some specific number that's about 24 years. And he's like, but for me, it's right now. And Veidt just knows that saying too well. And then Veight's like, what am I saying then to you? And he's like, you've attempted to destroy me, and I told you I was disappointed in you, and you tell me you killed 3 million people. And Veidt says that he was gambling, meaning he was gambling that Dr. Manhattan had morals. It's just interesting, and is a cool just call back to that whole conflict going on at the end of the original Watchmen. Because again, in this canon of Watchmen, no one really has complete good morals here. Not even Dr. Manhattan. And it's really cool that we see Veidt is just dropping squids in this machine, explaining where they're fully coming from and how they're exactly doing it. And it's just him keeping world peace, he says. Poor Looking Glass down there, man. You gotta feel for him. And he gets to a line, Veidt, where he's like, a lot has changed since you've been on Europa. And he's like, how'd you know I was on Europa? And he's like, a little elephant told me. It's gotta be related to Lady True, right? That's very interesting. So Veidt calls him out for why he's back and that it's clearly a Dr. Manhattan reason like usual, and it's love in this time. And he says, you just want her to love you for you. But who in their right mind wants to be romantically linked to a god? So he connects the dots, Veidt, and realizes he wants to be mortal. And Dr. Manhattan's like, can you make this happen? And Veidt says, you have a profound lack of imagination. Now brilliantly throwing back to what Dr. Manhattan was talking about in the bar to Angela, that one of her friends would tell her that 6 months from now. And it's just great that he even gets the line into Veidt where he's like, 6 months ago, Angela was telling me I had a great imagination. So Veidt figures that he has a brain now in this body. This device would be inserted to short circuit his memories and stop being aware of his abilities, so he just wouldn't know he was Dr. Manhattan. But what would only go against that is if there was a life-threatening situation where his reflexes would come out. This is just brilliant how to settle all this and explain how he would forget who he was in a realistic way in this universe, and how it makes sense of how he would still save Angela on the White Knight, which we'll see later. And this was awesome, just seeing Veidt's office here. I love seeing the squids on the wall. And finally, the Easter egg I've been waiting for is the Ozymandias action figure, which is talked about in the comics a lot, and just seeing it on screen was so cool. And he's explaining to Dr. Manhattan that he's had this tech for 30 years, and that John didn't know about this device because it had those tachyon particles blocking it. It's causing John's blind spot. It's almost like a kryptonite to John. And this was originally plan A, and it's amnesia. And plan B was to blow him up from the original story. And again, this is just masterful storytelling by Lindelof to think of all this and make it make sense. And before they're going to commit to doing this to Dr. Manhattan, Veidt says, if you have any business to finish, now would be the time. And Dr. Manhattan's like, well, Angela has a grandfather she's not yet aware of, and he and I have matters to discuss. So this is some real long game Dr. Manhattan stuff that he saw happen with Hooded Justice in the future, and why he really needs to go to him and connecting to his love for Angela. So obviously that's going to reveal itself in the finale, so that's very interesting how they even set that up. But before Adrian actually gives him this technology he wants to trade, and he's like, I saved the world from nuclear Armageddon, and only you and a select few know that I was that person. So he's not getting the recognition he wants or imagined. And he brings up how he asked Dr. Manhattan, was it all worth it in the end? And he says to him, you avoided answering by saying nothing ever ends. So he's like, I'm gonna ask, basically, again, in the sense just straight up saying to Dr. Manhattan, will I live to see the utopia, which was Ozymandias' whole goal of all this. And he's like, yes, but not here. And he informs him about Europa and how this was just beings designed to care for others and not themselves. And this whole Europa is just devoid of conflict. But Dr. Manhattan's saying in his experience, all they wanted was to please me, and it got boring. So he left his creations behind. I love seeing that and showing him float away. That was really cool. But he's like, they're all still there and they're just waiting for someone to worship. And Adrian says, sounds like paradise. This is just Ozymandias in a nutshell. Just a utopia and people just bowing to him, basically. And he says, would you like me to send you there, Adrian? And he's like, yes, John, I would like that. And Jeremy Irons kills it here with the tears coming out. Wow. It's like that big moment where it all comes full circle for him. And the tragedy of Ozymandias' story is it's not what he thought it would be for him. He got what he wanted and he hates it. And that's what we've been seeing his story all season long for Ozymandias. And I just think it's hysterical that John just basically forgot about Ozymandias, that he's even there. It's not that he has him prisoner, it's not on his mind. He really wants to get off Europa, which is just so funny. So now we see when Angela actually put the device in Dr. Manhattan's head, and she mentions him living in Tulsa, starting this new life, and he goes, that's a great idea. But he's saying in this scene here with her, with the device, my memories may be lost, but you won't be losing me. And it's a nice just touch of the comics with the shadows of them, makes it romantic just in the Dr. Manhattan way and just in the Lindelof way. Lindelof loves a good love story. He's a master at that as well. And I think a big part of him doing this show was also because he could do an episode with Dr. Manhattan in that sense. It's really his comfort zone. I feel like this must be a dream of his he's accomplishing. So we go back to the bar, and she's asking him to create life in front of her, and he creates an egg, and she's like, why not a chicken? But this goes to which came first, the egg or the chicken. That's also just underlying this whole episode, which we'll get more into with the grandpa. But he's telling her they're gonna have 3 kids, and she's like, well, are they half gods? And he's like, I would never pass on my abilities without their consent. So we learn, though, this interesting thing where if someone consumed his materials, in theory, they should get his powers. And she says, so if I eat this egg and it had your materials, I can walk on water? And he says, technically. So I don't know what the whole deal was with those eggs later in the episode that came out of the fridge, but I wonder what Dr. Manhattan has cooking up with that. Maybe someone will take and ingest his materials to continue on his legacy if he passes. So she asks, how long are we going to be living in Tulsa with these 3 adopted kids? And he's like, Dad, I don't know. There's a period of time I can't see. So this explains when he's actually Cal, that's blacked out in Dr. Manhattan's timeline of events in his head. Can't see it because of the device. And it's so well thought out and written because it's just crazy that Dr. Manhattan, where he's talking about his past, and then when he talks about the future, it's when he wakes up from when Angela takes this thing out of his head in the kitchen from last episode. And Angela says she loves it and it sounds like a tunnel of love. So there you go with that song that's playing and that why she would love that song. It almost makes you think this episode should have been named that, honestly, Tunnel of Love, but I mean, the title itself is great too. So we go back to when she's putting this in his head, and she's like, so it's going to be 10 years together and then a tragedy. And this is also when they're getting engaged. He gets on his knee, and he's like, yes, that's what will happen. But she's like, you're not going to tell me what exactly happens. And he's like, no. And it's such a great transition with her putting in his head to where we left off last episode. And we get this full-on Dr. Manhattan glow here in the kitchen, floating in the house, what we've been waiting for. Unfortunately, the CGI doesn't look that great. Maybe one complaint, but it's so hard to pin it against the show. It's got to be a budget thing, and I mean, I'm not certain how much money they gave this show. It was its first season, so first season of shows usually don't get as much money as a season 6 of Game of Thrones. So to compare it like that's ridiculous, but I wish it was given a little more money and looked a little better. But so be it. It is TV, not a movie budget. But she notices, like I said before, he still has the shape of John's face. And now we're here with Dr. Manhattan, and he's confused about what time he literally is, but he noticed the clock damage in the living room, and this will connect to the White Knight when he snapped out of it because of a life-threatening thing to save Angela, and he zapped one of the 7 cavalry members who was about to kill her. Just brilliant to tie that all around. So it's great though as the kids see him in the pool. I love just the shot of him over the water in the pool too. But he zaps the kids away. And he says they're safe. They sent the kids with the grandfather, so this is all in his plan. I mean, clearly the show is going to end, I feel, at the way end, the last second, us revealing all of Dr. Manhattan's full-on plan here that he had with this grandfather. And he says to Angela here, you need to see me in the pool. It's important for later. So theories galore. Let me know what you guys think of that. And now we go to when he teleported Captain Metropolis's mansion that's now been given to Hooded Justice. I love he pulls the chair up for Hooded Justice here to show he really is Dr. Manhattan. And it's explaining too that he has limited control of really future events at all. Again, going to what we know about Dr. Manhattan is that he is a puppet too, like all of us, but he can see the strings, but he's not this guy who controls the world. He doesn't control history of events like you would think he would. But he says he's trying to get the optimal outcome, and he wants to form an alliance with Hooded Justice to get this, and how it's all connected through Angela. But the grandfather didn't even know about Angela, didn't know his son had a daughter, and he's like, why does she want to go to Tulsa? And Dr. Manhattan says, because I suspect she wants to know about where she's from. And this will go to the theme again about how they're going to tie into Dr. Manhattan's story, Angela's story, Hooded Justice story about, genetic trauma and where you were raised and how it's a part of you. So we'll see how that all connects in the end. But I love how they're connecting both stories this way, bringing you Hooded Justice this episode, so it kind of gives us comfort knowing, okay, they are going to wrap all this together in one knot. And he's like, she wants you in her life, and she doesn't even know it. And then he talks about when he first saw her at the bar. He's like, I noticed her profound loss and emptiness. And clearly, she really does want a family. And he's like, I know because I'm talking to her right now. So this is what's just even crazier and so cool with Dr. Manhattan being 2 places at once. And he's talking to Angela at the pool in current time. And so we see that for her, it's right now. But for Hooded Justice, it's 10 years ago. Even Hooded Justice in the 10 years ago is told Dr. Manhattan he's talking to Angela right now, relatively. And Angela says, ask him how he knew Judd Crawford was a member of Cyclops and had a Ku Klux Klan robe in his closet. And the grandpa says, who's Judd Crawford? So Angela set up this chain of events by even asking this question. And she's like, did I start all this? Did I send my grandfather here? Is this my fault? But if you look at it another way, really, Dr. Manhattan kind of started by even going to the house in the first place. And he's like, isn't it a good thing Jug Crawford's dead? Does it matter where the idea came from? And that's why he says the chicken or the egg. This is going back to that idea and how you're like, the chicken and the egg in this situation is, did Angela cause Will to do the murder? Or did Will do the murder, causing Angela to ask the question that would start him doing the murder? There's no answer to it. It's no clear thing, just like what came first, chicken or egg. It's crazy. And he says to this answer, the answer appears to be both at exactly the same time. Just the whole thing with chicken and egg and Angela and her grandfather. And he just says, I'm hungry, which was great. Nice little humor with Dr. Manhattan. And I love it. We get to see him floating the cereal and the milk. And again, he says, watch the eggs when he pulls them out, and she throws them. Still got my eye on those eggs and what's the deal with that. Because of that hint about putting material into an egg to become like Dr. Manhattan. But it could just be a red herring. But he informs her here at the 7th Cavalry, he knows it's there, they're outside. And they're going to use this tachyonic cannon to teleport him and destroy him. That's key, because in the preview you see he's still alive, so you might be like, oh, it didn't kill him. But no, it's just teleporting him. And knowing Dr. Manhattan sees the future, like, yeah, he's 99% probably going to die next episode. And he knows that. And he's like, we can't stop them. There's nothing we can do. But she's refusing this and will still fight for him. And this is where the best line of the episode to me was, when he says to her, this is the moment where you try to save me when I told you you couldn't. And he says, in Night of the Bar, you asked me the moment I fell in love with you. This was the moment. That is just masterful. Lindelof just cementing himself at being able to write a love story in one episode so well, and tying that right together just with the whole nonlinear storytelling and how he would know already he loved this girl going up to her at the bar, and he knew in the future in this moment, but it was exactly at the same time. Again, going to this chicken egg thing too, it's just craziness. And they snuck in here through all this great writing some quick, really good action in the shootout with Angela and the 7th Cavalry, and right before she's about to get killed, Dr. Manhattan comes in, zaps some racist, which you love to see, and I'm so happy we got to see Dr. Manhattan in action. That's a big thing you had to give the fans here, and he did, which I was so happy about. And he stands right in front of this machine, and he basically lets it teleport him. And the way Regina King screams here is just incredible. You really feel the emotion now, this whole thing. And just at the bar, when we go back, she says at the end of this convo with him, I'm Angela. And he says, I know. That's just so powerful there that he even asked her name yet, because he knew it. And she introduces it, and him just saying, I know. Oh, man, it just works. And she's like, 10 years, tunnel of love, and something terrible happens. But you won't tell me what it is. And he's like, I won't. And that terrible thing is clearly going to be in the finale. This is just, again, another masterful line of dialogue where she gets up and she's like, I cannot get serious with someone if I know she's going to end in tragedy. And he says, by definition, don't all relationships end in tragedy? There is your just whole theme of the episode right there at you, the love theme of it, and just made you feel like Angela there as the viewer. Just, yeah, you're right, and it's really, oh my God, like Lindelof, again, he's a master of mystery. He's a master at character writing, and he's really just cemented himself in doing romance. And it just ends with, will you have dinner with me? And she says, F it, why not? Perfect way to close. And for me, the episode as a whole, before we get into the post-credit scene with Veidt, it's getting the rare 10 for me. I rarely give any shows or movies a 10. I think the last thing I gave a 10 was actually Leftovers episode in the final season, Laurie's episode. I did give a 10. It's been a long time coming, and it happens to be Lindelof again, and this for me was a 10. I'm not going to hold points against the CGI just because that's a budget thing. I can't blame the creators and writers for that. I mean, it's just a money thing given by the studio. So it to me is a 10. That would be my only complaint, how that worked, but it doesn't take away from all the hard work of what can be controlled, and the writing, the acting. It just doesn't miss a beat. And there needs to be praise here for Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. He is great. I loved him in Black Mirror. I loved him in Aquaman. He's been one of my favorite up-and-coming actors, and this was just awesome to see him do Dr. Manhattan. He did a great job. Regina King, just incredible as always, but this might be my favorite episode of her in this show. I think she was just showing how great and the range she has as an actress and why she's one of the best today. And Jeremy Irons, I thought his best scene, too, of the season with him crying about getting the news that he's going to go to Utopia. That was just great stuff. It's just, you see the effort put into this is just remarkable. So it's getting a 10. It's perfection to me. Can you get a better love story in a show like Watchmen? And can you make a better episode just about Dr. Manhattan and his love with Angela? I don't think you could. I mean, seriously, how could you think up something so complicated like this that makes sense and gives you the feels and gives you the action you wanted and keeps the mystery and sets up a finale all in one? Spectacular stuff. Just, if you need a lesson on non-linear storytelling, it is this episode. And great editing as well. It reminds me of just the Lost episode, which Lindelof also did, The Constant with Desmond, just being masterful editing, going back and forth between time, just great stuff, and having a great love story anchoring it with a great beauty to it in the end. So yeah, that's a 10. And then with the post-credit scene, basically what you take from it is another year passed here in Europa with Veidt, and he figures out there's a horseshoe. I guess that's his way of, I'm going to assume, digging out of that prison cell he is in, so we'll see. But please let me know what you thought of this down below. I love to hear your thoughts on the episode. Did you like it as much as me? Did you not? Give me any theories you have for the finale. And please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss my review of the finale. I also do other shows at the moment, His Dark Materials, Servant. And please follow me at Steve Varley1 on Twitter and Instagram for more of me. And I'll see you next time.